Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Retold by Florence Bell.
Chapter 1. In the Churchyard. My name is Philip Pirrip, but as a child I could not say my name. I called myself Pip, and that has been my name ever since. I never knew my mother and father. They both died when I was a baby. I was brought up by my only sister, who was married to a blacksmith, Joe Gargery. My story begins on a cold, grey winter afternoon in the churchyard where my parents are buried. I would often go to their graves and look down at the words on their gravestone: Philip Pirrip and Georgiana, wife of the above. I was a sensitive and lonely child, and was often sad. The marshes beyond the churchyard were grey. The river beyond the marshes was a darker line of grey. A bitter wind was blowing across the marshes from the sea. The graveyard was a dark and frightening place. I shivered. Cold and afraid, I began to cry.
"Quiet, you little devil!"
cried a terrible voice.
"Keep still, or I'll cut your throat."
A rough-looking man had taken hold of me. He held me tightly by the neck. "Oh, don't cut my throat, sir," I cried. "Please don't." The man's rough grey clothes were torn and muddy. Like me, he was shivering with cold. His shoes were old and broken. He had a torn piece of cloth tied round his head, and his eyes were wild and terrible.
"Tell me your name,"
the man growled.
"Tell me, quick!"
"Pip, sir, Pip," I answered.
"Show me where you live,"
the terrible man demanded. I pointed towards our village, which was about a mile away from the churchyard. The man stared at me for a moment. Then, with a sudden movement, he picked me up and turned me upside down. A piece of bread fell out of my pocket. The man pushed me onto a gravestone. Then he grabbed the bread and began eating greedily. I sat on the gravestone where he had put me, shivering and crying with fear.
"Now, tell me, where's your mother?"
the man in grey asked suddenly. "There, sir," I answered, pointing over his shoulder to my mother's grave. The man looked behind him and started to run. "I mean, she's buried there, sir. That's my mother. Georgiana, wife of the above."
"Oh, I see," the man said, limping slowly back. "And is that your father there, buried with your mother?"
"Yes, sir," I replied.
"Then who do you live with?" the man asked. "That is, if I let you live," he said roughly.
"With my sister, sir. Mrs. Joe Gargery, wife of Joe Gargery, the blacksmith, sir."
"A blacksmith, is he?"
the man muttered, looking down at his leg. There was a thick band of iron round his ankle, with a broken chain hanging from the band. The man came nearer. He took hold of my arms and tipped me back over the gravestone as far as I could go. His terrible eyes stared into mine.
"Now look here," he said. "Do you know what a file is?"
"Yes, sir."
"Then you get me a file, and you get me some food. Do you understand?"
"Yes, sir."
"Bring me, early tomorrow morning, a file and some food," the man repeated slowly. "Bring them to the old fort over there by the river. Say nothing to no one, and maybe I'll let you live. But if you tell anyone about me," the terrible man said slowly, "your heart and liver will be torn out, roasted and ate. Now, I'm not alone," he went on. "There's a young man near here, listening to every word I say. He has a secret way of finding a boy, wherever he is. Even if a boy is warm in bed behind a locked door, that young man will find him. What do you say to that?"
I promised I would bring him the file and the food very early in the morning.
Lord strike me dead if I don't. Say it, the man growled.
Lord, strike me dead if I don't, I repeated. The man lifted me down from the gravestone. Then he held his arms around his shivering body. Good night, sir, I whispered.
Nothing much good about it,
the man replied, looking across at the wet and windy marshes.
I wish I was a frog or a fish.
He limped off through the churchyard towards the marshes. He turned once to look back at me. I began to run home as fast as I could.